I spoke once before about the Eightfold Path, which was among the very first things that the Buddha taught. He taught the Four Noble Truths, and then he taught the Eightfold Path. And the Eightfold Path is, if you imagine the wheel that controls the rudder on a sailboat, you know how spokes go out through the circumference of it. The Eightfold Path has 8 spokes, and they're all connected. At midnight is one about samadhi, meditating. They use the designation right. I don't like to use that. I say Buddhist, because I don't want to imply that someone else is wrong. Chico, thank you. Chico, thank you. That's enough. I don't want to imply that someone else is wrong. So there's Buddhist samadhi, there's Buddhist view, there's Buddhist resolve, there's Buddhist speech, Buddhist conduct, Buddhist livelihood, Buddhist effort, Buddhist mindfulness, and that leads you back to Buddhist samadhi. And in the beginning, that path itself was the route to enlightenment. So enlightenment is actually a verb. It's not like a mental state that's on the other side of some fence that you climb over and you're cranking out calmness and wisdom and, with the regularity of an automobile engine. It's a verb. And if it's not a verb, if you're not actually practicing kindness, if you're not actually practicing gentle speech, if you're not actually doing those things, who cares what your mental state is? So Buddhism is not about finding some perfect mental state to run away with and live your life in the mall. It's about helping others and recognizing your coexistence with others. So the one I wanted to start with is called Right View, because this leads us directly into politics in a couple of ways. The original teaching of the Buddha Buddhist views was very simple. It was actions have consequences. And those consequences don't stop at death. Now, it wasn't until some time later, I don't know exactly how many centuries, that karma and reincarnation were added to this formulation. But in my tradition, in Zen tradition, we don't pay too much attention to reincarnation. We try to practice and focusing on what's right here, right now, in this moment. And of course, I've always wondered that if the self was not fixed and separate from the rest of the universe, what is there to transmigrate? So I tend to think that because Buddhism came from Hinduism, that there were a certain amount of tribal or cultural beliefs that came right along. And one of the things that Buddha was very successful about was breaking down those prejudices, like he didn't recognize castes. He didn't discriminate against women. All people could come together and practice this. And the practice is the Eightfold Path. Now, there's another way to look at or to consider right view. Our normal everyday consciousness is that we're a little capsule of self. And my eyes, my 5 senses, feed my brain and translate the world. And that's it. It's insufficient. And one of the Buddha's contributions was this idea of dependent origination. Know this, know that. No apple tree, no apples. No soil, no apple tree. No microbes in the soil, no apple tree. No sunshine, no oxygen, no moisture, no birds, no pollinating insects, no apple tree, no people, no nothing. So an equally true and equally valid description of reality is one big interdependent mass. If we think of the earth as the body of a dog, you see my two dogs back there, we're all kind of like fleas hanging around on the body, inseparable from it. So why do I mention this? I mention this because when we consider ourselves a singular self, a separate self, it's very easy to manufacture ideas about that self. And then we start to confuse those ideas with facts. We confuse the map with the territory. In fact, the self is edgeless. It's awareness. We can't locate where it is. We can't define its color or its shape. But we take it at face value that we feel a sense of self. And over the years, we define it, we're told who we are, we imply who we are from our relationships with other people. But really, when it comes down to it, we're in awareness. Well, this is a real, and as human beings, we're like radios tuned to the human frequency. And what I mean by that is that anything available to any human can come over our spinal telephone. We're not the good guys. I don't care how long you practice Buddhism, you're a human being. I don't care how many tantric yoga exercises you do, you're a human being. And as such, anger, delusion, greed are going to come over your spinal telephone. And what Buddhist practice or any spiritual practice helps you do is stop it at your teeth. Stop it at the edge of your body so that you don't give credence to it. You don't manufacture it. You don't send it into the world. So why is this so important? Well, we have a president right now who is really easy to hate and to be angry at, and to hold personally responsible for great historical history, traditions. And it's pretty important to understand that we're not different from Donald Trump. We don't misbehave as badly. But there have certainly been times in our lives, certainly in my life, anyone who knows me will tell you, where I've been selfish, self-involved, willing to do nearly anything to satisfy myself or get what I wanted. And then hopefully we go through a learning curve and we change our behavior so that we get on better in the world. But that doesn't mean that I'm exempt from those qualities which one tends to point to Donald Trump and say, oh, he's evil, he's this, he's that, as if we're exempting ourselves from those qualities. We all struggle with anger. We all struggle with taking sides. We all struggle with dichotomies. And if you understand that, it means that when you disagree with someone, you can disagree with them from a non-judgmental perspective. And that doesn't sound like much, I know. It sounds like a weak tea. But when you don't judge people, they feel it and they relax. And some of you may know that I spent 8 years working for Jerry Brown when he was governor, his first 2 terms as governor. And I was elected chairman to run a state agency. And at the time, it was very contentious. And I was just adding fuel to the fire. I had a bad mouth. I took no prisoners. My idea was to assassinate any of my enemies or opponents to get this good cause going, to build the arts in California. And I succeeded in paralyzing the state. I had all My people, the community artists on one side, and all the power and money on the other side. And there was nothing done. And the governor had to call me into his office and give me a very, very short lecture. And he said, Pete, in a democracy, all boats rise or all boats sink. You can't play favorites. And when I went back and thought about it, I thought, well, yeah, even my opponents are paying taxes to support this, and they have expectations that their culture will be treated as fairly as my own ideas about my culture. And from that germ, from that change, I was able to reach out, and I began by apologizing to a number of people that I had grievously insulted. And I was able to pull together a coalition that raised $1 million budget eventually to $20 million a year. But the best measure of my success was at my last finance committee, where I was begging for the last budget. I was facing 3 rock-ribbed conservatives from the Central Valley that I had been in pitched combat with for years. And just before the event started, they reached under the table and they pulled out hippie headbands and they put them on their heads. And I was just moved beyond words, because they were saying, you know, welcome, welcome. You're in the club. You did good. So I know that this works. I know that dropping one's judgments, making personal relationships, many times these men steered my budget through the political machinations of Sacramento, and then voted against me on the record because their constituents wouldn't allow it. But they knew that my budget was secure. So as I continued my Buddhist practice, I got a deeper and deeper understanding of how and why that works. So the first thing I want to suggest is that when we go on Facebook and when we rant and when we share vicious articles and when we share negative information, we're dripping acid in the drinking water. There's only one drinking water. And our anger and our bitterness is acidifying it. And at first it may be just like adding a little lemon juice. Gives it a little zing and a little taste, and it's kind of fun. It's fun to vent. Believe me, how much fun it is to vent. But eventually we're all drinking straight lemon juice. And that's one of the places that we are right now. And that leads you to right speech. So the Buddha's edicts were pretty simple about right speech. No lying, no rude speech, no telling another person what someone said about them in any way to cause discord or to harm their relationship. It's a tall order. It's not easy because our speech is tied to our impulses. And our impulses are tied to our worldview. So one of the reasons that we meditate and that we practice is so that we habituate the body to calmness, to emptiness, to seeing outside the personal or dropping through the personal, below the personal, into big mind, where everything joined. You know, millions of different kinds of fish live in the ocean. They're all in the ocean. So this leads me to the question of protest, something I'm really concerned about. Last year, I was invited to teach at Harvard for a week, to teach the theater of protest and to help some students create an agitprop drama like we used to do in the mime troupe. And so I thought a lot about protests. And one of the things I thought about a protest is that it's actually ceremonial. A protest is actually an invitation to a better world. We're inviting people to see another way of doing things. We're inviting people to behave in a different way. And all ceremonies have a sense of theater about them. In other words, they're designed to be observed. And when we forget that, we allow the message of our, excuse me, I'm going to sneeze. Welcome to the smoke of Sebastopol. When we forget that it's a ceremony and that it's being observed, we lose track of the message and we allow the message to be co-opted. So, as much as I support Black Lives Matter, as much as I support the right of protesters to protest, as a friendly critic, I need to point out that their message is being co-opted and it's being turned into videos to help elect Donald Trump. And the very same thing was done by Richard Nixon when me and mine were pursuing any means necessary to end the Vietnam War. We got the general public so disturbed that they voted for Richard Nixon and ushered in, decades of lawlessness and a huge swing to the right. So I wanted to say a few things about protests, and I've thought about this, and if you agree with me, I'd like you to share them widely, because there's a few steps that can be taken if we consider protests a ceremony and theater, and we think of who our audience is. The first most important thing is the audience is not the police or the politicians. That is not our audience. The audience is the great mass of American people who are trying to decide which side they're on. The people between the Alleghenies and the Sierras. They're not just the urban, sophisticated elites. It's the great mass of Americans, many of whom may be more socially conservative than I am. Many may have different ideas about abortion or the death penalty or this or that. And we can either concentrate on the differences or we can concentrate on the broad critical mass of humanity that's required to overthrow political power. So if I were somehow able to organize and run protests in the United States, this is what I'd do. First of all, at every protest, I'd appoint proctors and give them whistles. And their job is not to chant or shout or do anything but watch. And at the first sign of violence from provocateurs, from alt-right groups, from anarchist left groups, they blow these whistles and everyone should sit down immediately. Let the police wreak their aggression on the people that are destroying the neighborhoods, not the protesters. And it will be very visible to everyone that the protesters are sitting and other people are not. Second thing, I would have everyone dressed like they're going for church. It's very difficult to paint a picture of violence of a woman in a dress or a man in a jacket and a tie. And yet that's exactly what African Americans did during the early days of the civil rights struggle. They went in to get the crap beaten out of them in Woolworths, dressed for church. And it made the line indelible. People watching could see clearly who were the beasts and who were the humans. And it presaged the first great wave of civil rights changes in America. I would urge people to be silent. No one accepts an invitation when they're being shouted at. And in fact, protests have become ritualized so that the police or the powers that be will cordon off a little area. They'll shove everybody into it. They'll let them scream their brains out. They get 30 seconds of camera time and we go, oh yeah, people shouting. And you can agree with what they're shouting about or you can disagree. But they're not addressing the audience that they need. Black people make up 13% of the population of the United States. They need 38% of other people to change law. So that leads me to another way of looking that might be a little more Buddhist than normal. I don't know any people that are the color of my toilet. I don't know any white people. I don't know any people that are the color of a Lincoln Town car. I don't know any black people. White and black are basically descriptions about how much security local, state, and federal governments will offer you based on the amount of melanin in your skin. It doesn't describe anything human. It's a shorthand. But the problem with the shorthand is it makes us concentrate on the differences. And I suggest that what we need is an overarching understanding, an overarching terminology. And I'd suggest that it should be citizen. I read an article in the New Yorker this week about these militia groups in Michigan that went in and stormed the legislature with guns. And these guys talk about how they're the 3%ers. They claim that only 3% of Americans fought in the Revolutionary War. And they're the 3%ers defending the Bill of Rights. Well, that's a public address. A public relations address. If they were really defending the Bill of Rights, they would be marching alongside Black Lives Matter people to see that they were protected from violent agitators. If they were really defending the Bill of Rights, they would be agitating for women to get the same salary as men. So they're defending the Second Amendment, which is their right to carry weapons of war in the streets and feel like big guys. But whose side are they really on? If they're on the side of the police, and the police are committing offenses against citizens, they're not Americans. So if we're Americans, it's going to be the gang that we're in, that's going to be the country, then an offense against a citizen is a really serious piece of business. And it shouldn't matter what my racial genotype is or what my religion is. If I see a citizen being denied protections of the Bill of Rights and the Constitution, which are guaranteed to every citizen, it's my job to step forward. It's my job to register that. Now, you can do that just by showing up. You can do that in silence. You can do that with a sign. You can do that with a piece of tape across your mouth. And when you do that in silence, and when you employ that discipline, you're sending a message to your audience. We're not practicing violence of speech. We're not practicing violence of action. Why would you believe we're practicing violence of burning and looting? So, proctors with whistles, dressing for church, silence, and then my fourth suggestion is going home in the evening. Nighttime is when the wickedness comes out. Nighttime is when the wicked can hide. Don't be there. And when those procedures become publicly known, it becomes very easy for the audience to keep track. Audiences are good at that. They know the rules to football and baseball and basketball. They know what the rules are. And once they know the rules, they delight in following the game. And when the rules are broken, when a guy deflates the football or overinflates it, they know, and there's a big stink. So we need to set some rules for protest. And the protests are based on right view. That we're not denying the humanity of those that we're opposing. Yeah, they may be bigoted. They have life experiences that are very different than ours, but they're still human beings like us, available for enlightenment. And if we treat them that way, we may give them pause for thought. It's pretty obvious that the other way isn't working. I don't want to go through the entire Eightfold Path again, but I do want to read what the Buddha said about it, because it's worth knowing. It actually helps us, saves us from misperception. The Buddha said, "Just this noble Eightfold Path, right view, right aspiration, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. That is the ancient path. The ancient road traveled by the rightly self-awakened ones of former times. I followed that path. Following it, I came to direct knowledge of aging and death. Direct knowledge of the origination of aging and death. Direct knowledge of the cessation of aging and death. Direct knowledge of the path leading to the cessation of aging and death. I followed that path. Following it, I came to direct knowledge of birth, becoming, clinging, craving, feeling, contact, the six sense media, name and form, consciousness, direct knowledge of the origination of consciousness, direct knowledge of the cessation of consciousness, direct knowledge of the path leading to the cessation of consciousness. I followed that path. Lots of verbs. I followed that path. All action verbs. I followed that path. I practiced. Buddhist view. Buddhist resolve. Resolve originally meant giving up of home and being a renunciate. But it could be the resolve to universal kindness. It could be the resolve to respect all species. It could be the resolve to follow a peaceful, non-condemning, inclusive. However you phrase it, fixing that in your intention as you walk every day, as you meet people every day, keeping that on the back burner, so that instead of giving someone who irritates you the finger, is what comes to the fore. I read speech, no lying, no gossiping, no rude stuff, no slander, right conduct, refraining from killing, stealing, sexual misconduct. Right livelihood. It's a tough one for Americans. Gaining one's livelihood by benefiting others. Also by not selling weapons, poisons, or intoxicants. Those are choices we make. Sometimes it's hard, because if we look fully at many of the occupations available to us, we're causing harm. We're causing harm to the planet, causing harm to the oxygen, the water. We're causing harm to other people. When we make unhealthy food, when we add chemicals into the air. But for all its solidity, a corporation is a collection of people. And if we press in our own way and raise issues and organize, we are modeling behavior that other people can pick up. And it may take past our lifetime to engage, but that's the way vows are enacted. When we say, I vow to save all beings, it's obvious I'm not going to meet all beings. But by treating each person in every circumstance as an opportunity for enlightened kindness, I'm behaving in a way that can be observed and modeled. And the hope is someone else will see that as a good way to be and carry it on. And in that way, it becomes eternal. Right effort. Preventing the arising of unwholesome states and generating wholesome states. Preventing the arising of unwholesome states. Anger, envy, aggression. Doesn't matter what it's dedicated to. It clouds your essential clarity. It gets you all worked up inside. Makes it difficult to see things as they really are in this moment, which is where we live our lives. This moment. Right here. Right mindfulness. Being mindful of the teaching and the elements, keeping them in our consciousness, not being absent-minded, not lapsing. Am I consistent at this? No. Believe me. I refer to myself as Uncle Dribble when I lay something down and I can't find it. But I keep practicing. The other day I was looking for, and I was looking so intently that at a certain point I forgot what I was looking at. And I was standing in front of my open refrigerator, looking, searching the contents of my refrigerator, when I remembered that I was looking for my fountain pen. So, many, many lifetimes I'm going to be absent-minded. We say somewhere Buddha's still working on himself. But still, it's why we call it practice. Because when our mind wanders, we return it to our breath. When our posture slumps, we return to upright. And we keep practicing. And the more we practice, just like housebreaking a puppy, the better we get at it. And finally, right samadhi. When we get all of these other factors in line, when we feel okay about what we're doing for a living, when we see the world in an accurate way, both and, self and collective, we start to calm down. And then when we sit, the mind slows down on its own. We're able to be here in this moment. So this is a dark and difficult time. And divisions are being expressed as political ideas. And the ways in which they're being expressed are not particularly helpful. If we're going to be a country, we have to come up with some designation in which we're all equal. So I'm suggesting that we reinvigorate our understanding of what being a citizen is and what the rights of a citizen are. What the rights of a citizen are. And we make it our pledge to ensure that every citizen gets those rights and protections. Doesn't matter if we like them. You don't have to like black people. You don't have to like Pakistanis. But if you're going to be an American, if America is ever going to fulfill this image of itself that we want to be, that our founding fathers wanted, even in their imperfections, then we have to take it seriously, each and every one of us. And when we see a citizen being denied the right to vote. Them's fighting words. We have to stand up. We don't have to be angry, but we have to register our point of view, and we have to register it in a way in which people will listen. And if we can do that calmly and with respect, things soften up. People relax. I've got all sorts of friends. I've got friends who think COVID is a total flaw, who think that Dr. Fauci is trying to prevent any other cure but his vaccines that he has patents with from reaching the market. There are levels of suspicion that are astounding to me. But you know, everything in this moment evolved a moment that came immediately before and immediately before. And if we look at America, even since 1973, say Carter and Reagan, that period, we can see that the political system began sacrificing whole sectors of the citizenship. We lost millions of family farms when Paul Volcker raised interest rates 5 points in a single day, and all these farmers who had gone into debt at the urging of the Department of Agriculture and the farm bureaus, told that they were protected by rising land values. They lost their farms. They lost the fruits of generations. The leading cause of death on the family farm became suicide in 1978. And for every 5 farms that closed, a local business closed. So all through the Midwest, you lost high school principals, you lost hardware stores, you lost clothing stores, you lost grocery stores, and it became a dead and dying zone with extraordinary resentment that urban people had no idea about. Department of Agriculture policies were saying, get big or get out. They were supporting agribusiness, and they were willingly extincting the family farmer with no understanding of what it was doing to the culture and self-sufficiency and the innate wisdom of people who lived on a piece of land and understood it intimately and how to care for it. Those people are voting for Trump in large measure because they've been abandoned by Republicans and Democrats. And that's what came before. And when the Clintons figured out that you could turn the Democratic Party into a machine to go after the same big money as the Republicans, we lost a lot of other people. We stopped supporting unions. We stopped supporting teachers. We stopped supporting blue-collar workers and rural people. America pays less to retrain workers who've lost their jobs to globalism than any industrialized country on earth. So remember that when you see these Trump supporters out there. You're looking at people whose world has been shattered. You're looking at people who are scared to death. And they took a Hail Mary pass that this disruptor-in-chief would stand up for them. So maybe the Democrats will win this election if we all show up and we all vote. But I promise you that if the Democrats don't make good on their promises to poor people, blue-collar people, daycare workers, nurses' aides, farmers, small business owners, there'll be another Trump, and he'll be worse. So it's a good exercise to put ourselves in the shoes of the people that we call disreputables, or whatever Hillary called them. There's blame to go around. It was the entire Congress that voted on GATT and didn't vote money to retrain their workers for the jobs they knew they would lose. So we Democrats can't just pretend that we're the good people and that we had nothing to do with this. It's just like MSNBC and CNN, who are ice-picking the president today, can't pretend that they didn't give him all the airtime that he wanted and helped issue him into office. So we need to open up. We need to embrace people who are not us. And the only way we can do that is by expanding the idea of who us is. And the best way I know to do that is meditation. Maybe that's enough. Let me see if there are any questions. Silence is golden. Are you telling me to shut up, Steve? Let's see. Citizen. Okay. So here's one. This is something I know. In the 1980s, when the peace and justice movement was focused partly and rightfully on nuclear weapons proliferation, people of Zen Center in Los Angeles sat in Zazen at the gates of nuclear facilities. They did that up here as well. It's a practice I would like to see more, and it fits well with what you suggest. Gary Snyder added the idea that Zen students should also think about being the cooks who present simple, tasty meals at these protests, since Zen communities are centers of sanity, lucidity, and good cooking. There are many ways in which we can contribute, as we just have to think about it. So, thanks very much. I'm going to do my metta prayer. My friend Gary Clare, a fellow Zen student, reminded me that I've been leaving two parts off the prayer in interests of shortness. So I'll tell you what they are. Normally I say, may all beings be filled with loving kindness. We do that 3 times. Well, the way it normally goes is, may I be filled with loving kindness. May I be free from suffering. May I be happy and at peace. We do that 3 times. And then may each of us be filled with loving kindness. And then finally, may all beings be filled with loving kindness. So that's what I'm going to do if you want to join me. May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be free from suffering. May I be happy and at peace. May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be free from suffering. May I be happy and at peace. May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be free from suffering. May I be happy and at peace. May each of us be filled with loving kindness. May each of us be free from suffering. May each of us be happy and at peace. May each of us be filled with loving kindness. May each of us be free from suffering. May each of us be happy and at peace. May each of us be filled with loving kindness. May each of us be free from suffering. May each of us be happy and at peace. May all beings be filled with loving kindness. May all beings be free from suffering. May all beings be happy and at peace. May all beings be filled with loving kindness. May all beings be free from suffering. May all beings be happy and at peace. May all beings be filled with loving kindness. May all beings be free from suffering. May all beings be happy and at peace. And I want to make special mention of the passing of my dear friend Geraldine Brandilius, who died on the 31st. A true bodhisattva, friend to the Hells Angels, friend to the Grateful Dead, helped me nurse my friend Sweet William through the last 2 years of his life. She'll be missed.